In this episode, we preview the NHL playoffs and give you our predictions as to who will make out of it each division with Tyler Kasch, as well go to town on NHL's decision on Tom Wilson's actions. We team ISO the Chicago Blackhawks and Philadelphia Flyers with Nick Gismondi and Anthony SanFilippo. Hit the music. Welcome to Jablam Sports Hockey, folks. I'm your host, Peter Borjaranov, and the mic is always on. You can find me on Twitter at Russia98. You can find the full show at Jablam Sports. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet us. Use the hashtag Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. Please subscribe to us if you haven't done so yet, and click on the three dots in your podcasting app. Share our show with three hockey fans you know. Thank you, everyone. Remember, check out our website, go to jablamsports.com, see all our podcasts, and even game notes for each episode. You'll get links to all the things we mentioned on this show, including guests. For our podcasts, click on podcasts, and then hockey on this show specifically right on our website. Time for Trending Now. Joining me for Trending Now is Tyler Kasch. He's on the Fourth Line Goon Hockey Podcast. You can find him on Twitter at Tyler Kasch. Welcome to the show, Tyler.
Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. Obviously, on our game notes for this episode, I believe it's episode 21 for season 6, we're going to put your Twitter handle on there. We're going to put a link to your website, at least a Facebook group. Is there any other kind of pitch you want to deal for the listeners?
No, you can find us wherever you podcast. It's Fourth Line Goon, number 4. And you can find it at fourthlinegoon.com. On Twitter and Instagram, I'm Tyler Kasch.
We're going to get to all things Tom Wilson Fiasco in just a bit. Hold on. Hold your horses, fans. All right. I do want to talk a little preview of the playoffs. I know we did our preseason estimation on teams, and people can go check that out. There's all those episodes at the beginning of the season of season 6. We talked all about those predictions. So we're going to do a little predictions of the playoffs. But first off, we'll do our little predictions of the 4 divisions in the Discover Central. We've got Carolina, Florida, Tampa, and maybe Nashville or Dallas. First off, do you think Nashville has it all sealed up versus Dallas?
Man, it seems as if it took Dallas a little too long to find their footing. And I know there was a lot of analysts that were saying all it's going to take is a slow start, and it's going to be hard to catch back up with these division races, especially with how teams are playing each other in multiple stances, kind of like that whole baseball vibe where you play a few times against the same team. I know even there's situations where I believe it was 7 games in a row that the Coyotes played the Blues. Mm-hmm. And so now the Blues have this like horrible schedule at the end where they have to play Vegas and Colorado for the rest of the year. And so that's where the real misleading comes in. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what Nashville's schedule looks like. It doesn't sound right that they would make playoffs over Dallas. Mm-hmm. I would hope that, considering Dallas did so well last year in the postseason, that they would pull it together here for the last stretch. With that being said, that 4th place is in every division is crazy because that 4th place team is a lot of times like very low in points compared to the 1st and 2nd. Mm-hmm. I know like the Blues are hovering around 50 points. Meanwhile, you have the Colorado Avalanche and the Knights are over 70 points. So it's like there's a big gap there. I think Dallas might squeak in, especially with Sagan being activated. Nashville isn't really the team that they were years ago. So, I have to say, I feel like if it's at all possible, depending on schedule, I think I could see the Stars pulling it together for that division.
Wow. And then out of the actual full division, going to the 3rd round, Carolina, Florida, Tampa, and then I guess Dallas is your pick. You think Dallas has a shot, or you think Tampa is that Stanley Cup contender that could repeat and go that far?
No, I don't. I'm one of those few people that doesn't think that Tampa is as scary as they are on paper. Mm-hmm. I think 2 years ago was a testament to that the right team can knock them out very easily. They seem overly cocky, very confident, and that's not necessarily what wins championships. Last year, they kind of all band together. They had that connection. I don't know, they have the locker room vibes, and finally it seemed to click for them. But that's because they had something to fight for. And I might be cheesy when I say that, but I think teams really rally behind that. Mm-hmm. It's why Dallas did so well last year. It's why Vegas did so well their first year. I think the team to look for in that division is Florida. I think they're the real deal. I really do. As far as the Panthers go, I think there's a lot to be said by what Quenneville and what a good coach in general could do for a team. I mean, look at what Barry Trotz did for the Islanders, and I think we're witnessing that. I don't think that they're necessarily strong enough to go that far. That kind of rests on Bobrovsky if he's going to be that $10.5 million a year goalie that they're paying for, or is he going to shit the bed like he always does? I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, he really didn't have a team in front of him before.
Wow, that's a good pick. There's too many question marks on this puzzle put together Florida team. I had them doing a little bit better last year, and then they fell apart. This year, it just seems like everything's coming together too perfectly, and I don't know if they can keep it going. I'm on the fence whether it's Carolina or Tampa to go through.
Yeah, I know people love to cheer for Carolina. I just don't see it, man. I don't think they have enough star power. I think that their goaltending is a huge question mark. I know I'm going to butcher his name. What is it?
Nedeljkovic. You're asking the guy with the Serbian background how to pronounce Nedeljkovic. You can say it Nedeljkovic or you can say it Nedeljkovic.
So are they going to write? Is he their man? Is he like, are they? That's the question. Yeah, you have to figure that out, and we'll get to it as far as the North goes. But I hate to say it, I love the Leafs. I freaking love watching that team, but that's a big question mark too. Is Campbell going to be their guy? Is it going to be Campbell backed by Anderson because he's coming back? Like, I don't know. It's really a big question mark. Is this guy the real deal, or has he just been playing well in a pretty crappy division?
Well, yeah, so far Campbell looks like this year's Hamburglar kind of thing. It's just like, wow. But again, he had that pedigree though. He always had that pedigree, but he could just never beat that first guy. He couldn't go ahead of Jonathan Quick or whoever he was right behind. So this year he got that opportunity when Anderson was struggling and he got injured. And I don't even know if Anderson's going to be fully 100% come playoffs. So we'll see. We'll see with that, but I'm pretty sure Campbell's number one and Anderson's going to be a backup.
I think Anderson will be a backup the way Ben Bishop was to Udobin last year.
Yeah.
Which Udobin was great. I loved watching him play. I loved his spirit. But at the end of the day, he's not good enough. And I hate to say that. He's just not a number one goaltender. Yeah. He's a 35-year-old goalie that hit a hot streak. Yeah. And we're seeing that more and more, especially in these younger goalies. Like, obviously, when the Blues won, Binnington was the hot story. And we're seeing these teams take chances on younger goalies. But yeah, that's a big, big, big question mark. I hope the Leafs can pull together. I'm a big fan of what they're doing. Are they as scary as they seem, as much as all these reporters are holding them up on a pedestal? I don't know. The best thing they got going for them is that they don't have to play the Bruins in the first round.
Yeah, you're talking about goalies coming out of nowhere and having a good season. You're talking about Cam Ward's entire career based upon his first year for what he did with Carolina. So let's continue with the North, though. So there's Toronto, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Montreal. Don't hate me, Calgary. You're pretty much done. Much done. Mr. Fourth Line Goon, who do you see winning the North? Do you still think it's Toronto?
Yeah, I think it's an obvious Toronto. I think they're running with it.
So they're gonna win. They're gonna win the first two rounds. You're saying that? Okay, wow.
The first round. Here's my prediction. Here's my hot take. I'm gonna have them when I do my bracket. And I mean, granted, I think that I have the bracket figured out. I know last year was a little bit confusing too with how teams were gonna play each other. Yeah. wouldn't be surprised if you see them go all the way to the conference final and have to play a team like the Bruins and get a taste of what they've seen in the past. So I don't know. Is it going to be a confidence boost that they're playing these crappier teams from the North? Maybe, but yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any other real threat as far as that goes. I mean, Montreal was looking hot for a little bit, but they just got some missing pieces. And I mean, is Carey Price 100%? I mean, do you got Jake Allen starting? What are you doing there? I mean, that's crazy too, because I don't think Jake Allen's good enough to carry a team either. So who knows?
Who could be that team that could upset the Leafs in that first 2 rounds? Who is that team out of the
Jets?
Yeah.
I think Winnipeg, and I'm not a Winnipeg fan at all. Sorry, whoever's listening. If you're a Jets fan, I apologize. I'm not a big fan of the Jets. I've always think that they've just been missing the mark. Like there's just something that's not clicking. I know that they were like, they're the big giant guys and they used to use their bodies in their force for like all that. And I don't know. To me, it just never. When they went up against the Knights there that first year, 3 years ago, and everyone was like, "Oh, ha ha ha! Here's the team that's finally going to take them out," and they took them out in 5 games, courtesy of Ryan Reeves, Winnipeg native, and I don't know, it just wasn't real. And I know Hellebuck gets a lot of praise, and I'm going to sound like a bonehead by saying he's not as good as he. I don't know. I know it's a bonehead opinion, but I'm not sold on Hellebuck. I'm not sold on the Jets, but they are a team that can come out of nowhere. I wouldn't see Montreal really being a threat. Who are we looking at for that fourth one right now?
McDavid and Draisaitl, the Oilers.
Oh, Edmonton. Okay. Mike Smith. That's a big question mark because Mike Smith, when they didn't get a new goalie and they just re-signed Mike Smith, everybody laughed at him. So who knows? I mean, he might be able to string together a couple of wins. I don't see them going the full distance. That's a real good man. Yeah, you know what? I still got to say the Jets. Still got to say the Jets would be the team that could surprise some people.
Let's go to your division, the Honda West. There's Vegas, Colorado, Minnesota. Unless there's a crazy collapse, we've got St. Louis, right?
Right.
Which will be the toughest out of these 4? Like, it's just hard to beat out of these 4 teams.
I think that this division is going to be the longest. Like for that first round, that second round, we're talking 7 games. Like, I think it's going to be brutal. I think 6-7 games, because you got to look at it this way. The Knights look like a juggernaut, right? And I know that's a biased opinion, but they look insane. The addition of Matthias Janmark and now Peyton Krebs, who got his first point in his first game. They didn't add a lot, but they added depth, which was a huge issue with that team for a very long time. The third line was always an issue. They couldn't really find their identity. Adding those players alongside Alex Tuck, who's having a career year, they look great. I've said this I'll say it again until I'm blue in the face. I think the Knights have the best top 6 in the league, not the top 3. We're not talking Pasta, Marchand, and Bergeron. We're not talking Marner and Matthews, and I guess whoever's on the line with them at that point. We're not talking about that. I'm talking about top 6. So if their top 6 is healthy, that third line has it figured out, and then that fourth line is just a bunch of bruisers, it seems like every line has their identity. And then on top of that, you got Fleury, who's playing out of his mind. Leonard could come in if Fleury happens to burn out, but I don't see that happening. I think they're the real deal. The question mark for me is I think the Avs adding Dubnyk was a mistake. I think it was a huge mistake because Grubauer is going to play the whole postseason. Dubnyk's not going to see a game, like maybe in relief, but probably not. Like a game here or there, not enough to change a series, or not. And he's not good enough to take over if Grubauer goes out, So I think that was a waste of cap space. I think they should have went out and got themselves some more depth, because they're a team that's had a huge problem with that as well. Because, you got McKinnon and Landeskog, and if one of those guys is not 110%, then they're not that scary, in my opinion. So, I still think it'll be a 7-game series no matter who. And okay. Minnesota seems to have fixed a lot of their problems. with Kaprizov playing out of his mind.
Yeah.
Jordan Greenway he's playing aggressively and he's playing hard. And that's something that you're going to want when you're going deep into the playoffs. The question mark, or it's not a question mark, but that fourth place, I feel so sorry for whoever gets it, which is looking like the Blues. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, they're so lost. They're so lost as a team. If they get that first round, it's a first round exit. And that's the only team that I could see not going 6 or 7 games in a series is if the Blues make it. If somehow the Yotes squeeze by or the Sharks, I think the Sharks or Kings could still potentially do it. It's not likely, yeah. But if they did, those teams are more of a surprise, I feel like, than the Blues. The Blues seem like they're beaten already. They're going into the postseason injured, and they just really haven't ever clicked all year round.
So you think if we get to see the beautiful and spectacular series between the Golden Knights and the Avalanche, you think Knights in 7? That's Knights the number?
And it would be their home ice too. Mm-hmm. So Knights in 7, absolutely, because T-Mobile is like the loudest, most insane. That's real deal. I mean, it's. Oh
my goodness, I loved it. When I went there, oh man, I'm so glad. Stupid pandemic, get away, please go away. I took a trip to Vegas like a month before. Oh my God. Wow. Oh my God. And anybody, if you're a visiting person, please go to the game early because you get the whole Vegas experience at the arena inside the T-Mobile before. Like the traditional, especially in Canada, you go to the game, you have your time, you go get your beer, you go slow to your seat, there's the anthems, okay, there's the draw. No, you get the lightning on the ice, you get the beautiful anthems, you get a spectacular show visually before the game even starts.
They have like a whole pregame thing, and then in intermissions they have Circus Soleil acts. Yeah, it's next level. And I know a lot of old school hockey mentality is like, oh, boo that. Like, we don't want new stuff. But, man, I tell you what, you get your money's worth. It's so much fun. And that home ice advantage in an arena like that means the world. I think that if it goes to 7 games and they're both healthy, both teams healthy, I think the Knights can do it. And it goes the same with Minnesota. Minnesota's very scary. They lost the last 5 in a row to Minnesota. Up until this year, they only beat Minnesota 1 time ever into this season. And it was in overtime. They never beat them in regulation until this season. So they've had their number. The Minnesota Wild kind of remind me of the New York Islanders of this division. They kind of have that, we're going to break you down. We may not be the most exciting team to watch, but we're going to throw our weight around. We're going to slow you down. We're going to find your weaknesses. They're a scary team. I don't think they're good enough to go the whole way either, but that division, out of all of the divisions, 6 or 7 games is going to be one of the most exciting for sure.
All right. And then we go to the lastly, Mass Mutual East, Pittsburgh, Washington, Boston, and New York Islanders. That one's all said and done pretty much. It's gone. It's a tough one, though. It's very tight. Who do you see pulling out of this tight group? We've seen all 4 teams win cups in recent years or go pretty far like the hardworking Islanders last year. Who's going to pull out of this tough one?
Bruins.
Wow. Okay.
They're scary, dude. They're still scary. And I think Rask still has a chip on his shoulder from the 2 years ago against the Blues, that Game 7. Like, I think they all do. I think that they're a scary team. I think it took them some time to figure out some of their depth moves, like some of the younger kids stepping up, especially losing Krug and Zdeno Chara. I have the Bruins, but I really do think the Caps are going to be also a team to look out after. Pittsburgh, they're not the team they were. That's just the reality, and a big part of it is goaltending. Their goaltending is just not. It's not Fleury, right? And then it's not even Matt Murray. It's lost. It's lost in translation. They're not the same team they were. And I think that the Bruins are that team to look out after. Close second, I think, is the Capitals. But I do think it's going to wind up being the Bruins going to the conference final.
Wow. All right. That's a pretty interesting pick. They're very different than they used to be, and that core is a little bit different. That would be pretty... that would be exciting. It would be exciting to, again, see the Leafs versus the Bruins in the third round if that happens.
God. That's hockey.
Oh,
that's hockey.
Wow.
But here's the thing. I always said that the Leafs would win the year that they took the Bruins out. I always said that. Now we're in a weird year, right? Where they're not playing them early. They're going to have to play them late. In my opinion, when the Caps took out the Pens, the year that they won the Cup, it was game over. That was their hump. Like that was their hurdle that they could never clear. And they won. They went on to win the whole thing. And I've said since that day, I say when the Leafs can beat the Bruins, they will win the Cup. So, So I'm going to hope to God as a Knights fan that if the Leafs beat the Bruins in the third round and go to the Stanley Cup final, my money would be on them. Honestly, they're riding a high, and it's like nothing can stop them now. They have so many veterans that have been trying at it for years and years with Thornton and Spezza and Wayne Simmons, and they did a lot of depth moves. So they're a scary team, and if they can beat the Bruins there in the conference final, I truly think that they're going to take it all. But I think that's the matchup. I really truthfully do.
All right, quick update. I know people are already listening to this a day or two later, but Elliot Friedman, in 31 Thoughts, the article that he always drops, he has reported that they will start the NHL playoffs on May 15th, and then presumably the Canadian North Division maybe days later, maybe staggering in a couple of days, but it sounds like from Elliot Friedman, and that's a trusted source if we're going with Elliot.
Wow, okay.
So there
we go. So 11 days away?
Yeah.
Less than 2 weeks. Wow.
Here we go, folks. It's running. All right. So that's your predictions. We're going to have a few of them on the website for this episode 21, season 6. And let's go, before we let you go, Tyler, let's talk a little bit about our friend Tom Wilson. The NHL fines him $5,000 for his altercation between him and Pavel Buchnevich from yesterday's game between the Washington Capitals and the New York Rangers. He also had some altercations with one of the great talents of the league, and that's Artemi Panarin. First off, what do you think about the fine? I would think that the league needs to change this. $5,000 to these millionaires? What is this?
It's absolutely, it's a spit in the bucket is what it is. It's nothing to him. And as long as he knows that these things are going to be the punishments, it doesn't matter to him. You know, I can't remember what country it was, but I remember there was a hockey player and he got pulled over speeding. I wish I knew names and I wish I knew the exact country, but he went 30 over in this particular country. I think it might've been Germany. They charged you based on your income. So the fine was based off of how much you make. And he got pulled over. He was going 30 over and he wound up having to pay like $180,000 speeding ticket. Something completely insane. Now, I mean, I might be off on these numbers here, but I remember being like, wow. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that would be a fair way to assess what happens. Like, for instance, if I were in charge of player safety, Panarin's out for 3 games, right? Mm-hmm. So what does he make? Let's find out what he makes, right, in those 3 games, and let's find Tom Wilson that much money, which is a lot because Panarin makes a pretty dime, even more than Tom Wilson. So that would be my suggestion, and that's just a start. Tom Wilson has been an issue with this league for a long time, and I'm trying to remove bias. I really am, because I'm a Reeves fan. I'm not a big Caps guy, obviously, but just being a hockey fan and growing up, Tom Wilson just doesn't respect the code. And by not respecting the enforcers code, he makes enforcers look like unimportant threats. When in reality, if you're following the code and you're respectfully handling things the way you should with fighting and hockey, it's warranted, and it makes the sport what it is, and it's awesome. I mean, I run a podcast called Line Goon. Like I love that old style grit. Like I love fighting. I think it's the best part of the sport. But you don't punch someone with your gloves still on. You don't punch someone when their back is faced towards you. You don't pick somebody up by their hair and body slam them on the ground. You just don't. There's no room in any sport for that. And he makes enforcers like Ryan Reeves and even Zach Cassian, who I know gets can get kind of gritty as well, but he makes those guys look like bad dudes too. And they're not taking cheap shots. They're not hurting people. They're not getting suspended. Up until, I think Reeves, on his entire career, he has one suspension, and he's a tough guy. He leads the league every year in hits, and no one will fight him because they're so afraid of him. You know, Tom Wilson he's a punk, and he hurts people, and he doesn't play by the code, and he plays a dirty game. And when he plays a dirty game, the best thing you can have for you is just being like, hey man, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do as an enforcer. That is not what he's supposed to do.
We can go through the list. September 22nd, 2017, he got suspended 2 preseason games for his hit on Robert Thomas. Same year, only days into the season, he got 4 games again for boarding Sammy Blaze. The list goes on. 2018, 3 games in the playoffs for his check to the head of Zach Anton Reese. And this season, I think he was initially, in 2018, he was initially suspended about 20 games, and they got against Oscar Sundqvist, and then they appealed and reduced it to 14 games. And then this season, again, he's already been suspended a couple times. This suspension earlier, this season, 7 games for Carlo, now this, and there has been many times which he could have been fined or suspended that they're not even on the list. Right. When is the league gonna totally ban this guy? Fans want him out of the league. When do we draw the line? He's not learning.
No, clearly not. And as you said, he appealed that 20-game suspension. So if he appealed, why can't the New York Rangers appeal? I think they have every right to get in a room, or at least on a Zoom call like we are, and hash it out and give their reason. And they did issue that statement where they're calling for the head of player safety to be fired, which is insane. I cannot remember a team ever doing that since being a hockey fan. And that speaks volumes. They were out of the playoffs. Obviously that game actually was the one that took them out of the race. So yeah, it's not horrible for the team that Panarin's out for the next 3 games. But what's horrible is it looks bad for the league. It looks bad for the sport and any injuries that might have happened to any of those players. And then he went to the box and he flexed and he laughed about it. That kind of stuff is awesome when you play responsibly hard. What's the code called? Violent gentlemen. That is a real thing because you are violent, but you respect each other's boundaries. You don't want anyone to get hurt. And when everything's said and done, you shake hands. And instead, that guy out there, he's a punk. That's all there is to it.
It's ridiculous, the tweet that Washington put out there, and we're going to have the tweet that Tyler put out there on his Twitter that he made a joke about that tweet, and that's going to be posted on our episode page. You can see that on his Twitter page as well. And the statement by the Rangers, as you said, it's if you go to the nitty-gritty, they said they're horrified for the act of violence last night at Madison Square Garden. He's a repeat offender with a long history of acts. We find it shocking that the NHL and their Department of Player Safety failed to take the appropriate action. If they further on in the comment, they basically say they want the head of the NHL Player Safety, George Peros, and believe he is unfit and to continue his current role. That is a hard statement. We've never even seen any kind of statement even close to anything like that.
Especially in this time, in this year, everyone's walking on eggshells, right? You got to make sure you're not offending anybody when you make these statements. They didn't care. They're like, nope, We are going straight for the throat. This is what we want. Here's the real question, though. Do you think Bettman answers? Do you think anything comes from this other than maybe a fine to the New York Rangers for speaking out against the league?
Oh my God, that would be a laugh. That would be a laugh if they fine the Rangers for the same amount of money or more than Tom Wilson got fined for nothing. And I think that's the main reason why they threw it in the NHL's face is like, you're going to fine him this much. Show me that we're going to release the statement and show me what you're going to do to us, because it's going to backlash even harder against the league if they do that.
Yeah. But what comes to mind, though, is when they fined Tortorella, like, what was it, $10,000 or $20,000 for speaking his mind about a very obvious problem that was going on in the league. So who knows? I mean, they don't like it when you bite the hand that feeds in the league, and that's for sure. It's going to be very interesting if they can't ignore it. I feel like they really can't ignore it. If I were the Rangers, and I said this to the co-host of my podcast, who does not agree with me, by the way, or you, he has a complete opposite stance, which is going to happen. You're seeing some of these polarizing opinions. Excuse me. We were discussing the fact that if I were the Rangers, I would refuse to play. We have seen teams refuse to play for other reasons, beliefs, politics, whatever it may be. You're being mistreated. This is a union of sorts. It's like your employer isn't defending you. It's not standing up for you. I think it was very punk rock of the New York Rangers to issue a statement like that, to call them out, to stand and unify. They don't have a tough guy on their team to make a run at Tom Wilson next game. Then that's how old school hockey would have been, right? Like I saw Sean Avery posted a video where he said he would, if it were him, he would take a run at whoever was in net and just take them out. And it's like, ooh, okay. Like, police it yourself, I guess. Right?
And that's the way the league's gone, because they don't have a Ryan Reeves or a Zach Kassian on most of these NHL teams. So it's so hard for them to police on the ice. The Leafs finally have one. They got their Wayne Simmons. So they got a guy that can do that for them, especially in the playoffs. Wow. Tyler.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how the Rangers handle it. I mean, I hope something comes from it. As you said, you can't play like this. He's going to hurt somebody. I've seen a lot of people relate it to the Bertuzzi incident. They said it was the same intent, just not the same injury. So what happens if Panarin, gets a concussion or his face busted in? Because, he picked him up and dropped him right back on the ice. Yep. I don't know. If his injury was bigger, maybe they might have stepped up. But you need to step up before he hurts somebody.
Yeah, you need to step up. And I've already said millions of times, you cannot base it upon injuries. You have to base it on the action itself. You get high sticks many high sticks are by accident. People aren't intending. They're trying to lift the player's stick and they cut the guy in the eye or in the face. It's by accident. It doesn't matter. It's still a 2 or a 4. Why not these actions? Come on,
absolutely. NHL. I agree.
Wake up. All right. You can find Tyler on Twitter at @TheTyler Kasch. Thanks for the chat, Tyler.
Thanks, bud. I appreciate you.
As we finish off this season's Team ISOs, before we start the playoffs next week, or maybe in the future, we don't know yet, the NHL hasn't said yet, let's head to the city that loves you back. We Team ISO the Philadelphia Flyers. Welcome back to the show, Anthony SanFilippo. You can find him on Twitter at SanAnPhilly. He's the writer for CrossingBoard.com and the co-host of the SnowTheGoalie podcast. Thank you for dropping by again, Anthony.
Absolutely, Peter. Always a pleasure.
So it's been a weird year in Philly, hasn't it?
Weird is definitely the operative word there, because I think that you and I and everyone else coming into this season thought the Flyers were going to be not just a playoff team, but a team that could have potentially competed for the Stanley Cup and being one of the final four teams. And they got off to an okay start. They weren't playing great hockey at the time, but through the end of February, they were okay. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, March hit, and it was as if they completely forgot how to play the sport of hockey. Their defense was terrible. Their goaltending was terrible. They went through stretches where they couldn't score goals. Special teams was bad. Then you got some disgruntled players in the locker room, and then who's getting benched, who's getting demoted to the fourth line. And it just snowballed on them, really. And the schedule was such that it was so difficult to find any practice time because they were playing basically every other night, sometimes even more than that. That Coach Alain Vigneault really had no way of fixing it in a practice session. Like it was just kind of like video and talking to them, but until they can actually train themselves to do something different, the Flyers were doing the same thing and getting beaten by the same mistakes over and over and over again. And then here we are, where they're not even making the playoffs this year, and it's a major disappointment in this city. I can promise you that.
In our season preview episodes, and just like you mentioned, season 6, of course, this season, episode 5, we had the Mass Mutual East Division preview episode. You can check that out on our website, jablamsports.com. All our experts, every single one, had the Flyers finishing second or third. I think we had Jason Mitras on. He pretty much said the same thing. If you can pinpoint it, I know you mentioned a couple things. If you can pinpoint it on one or two, what do you think specifically was the hardest for the Flyers this year?
Well, the first and foremost, I mean, you can't win in the NHL without good goaltending. Mm-hmm. At least consistent goaltending. And Carter Hart had a really bad year for a lot of reasons. I mean, you can, whether it's he was, made some adjustments in the offseason that didn't quite work out in the way that he had hoped they would, or the team had hoped that they would. He dealt with failure for the first time. He had not at every level he's ever played at, he's always been successful from the time he was a young kid till the time he got, even breaking into the NHL, he had great success right away. So he had that season that young goalies tend to have, and you can go back through history. Carey Price had it, and that's the guy he compares himself most to. And if we go back to 2010 when the Flyers were in the Stanley Cup Final, that year the Canadians, Jaro Halak, took over for Carey Price because Price was so bad, and Halak got them to the Eastern Conference Final. Imagine if Carey Price was himself, that Canadians team could have won a Stanley Cup that year, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, other goalies have done it. I mean, we go back to Mike Richter, who was sent down to the minors the year before the Rangers won the Stanley Cup in '94. So it's happened a lot of times. Like, there's several goalies. So I think that's your number one issue with the Flyers. Second to that, and a close second, was the fact that the team defense was just dreadful. And it's not just on the defensemen themselves. I mean, they weren't very good. A lot of them took steps backwards. Specifically, Phil Myers had a really bad year. Travis Sanheim's kind of rebounded a bit here in the second half of this season, but his first half of the year was not very good. Provorov's actually taken a slight step back this year. So, I mean, the defensemen haven't been great, but the forwards supporting the defense is really where it's been the worst, because they're the guys who are turning the puck over in the neutral zone and then not getting back. They're the guys who are not winning the board battles, the 50-50 puck battles. They're the guys who are losing track of wide open guys on the side of the net or in the slot. I mean, those are the players that have cost the Flyers this year. So team defense would be a 1A to not enough goaltending, and that's really where it went sour for the Flyers.
Well, you already got me stumped now. I had my follow-up questions here planned, Anthony, and you totally stumped me. So I'm going to follow up with these ones here. We did notice Carter Hart obviously struggling, that .877 save percentage. Now he's out for the season. Do you think he's going to fully rebound like we've seen? I know you mentioned Halak and that one season with Price and in Montreal, and they said, in French, Halak means stop. That was the whole thing that happened that year. I guess Philly didn't have that person that could replace Carter Hart this year. So you do see him fully rebounding and even taking that next step that we all already thought we would from Carter Hart?
I like a lot about Carter Hart. I like a lot about his game. I like a lot about his approach to the game and how he handles things. I do think Carter will be back. I do think he'll be back to the kind of goalie he was prior to this year. I always felt, Peter, that the people who were saying that he was a potential Vezina candidate, I think that they were jumping the gun a little bit. I mean, you're not many 22-year-olds who come in and are Vezina candidates at that age, right? I mean, usually you got to be a little bit older before you hit that level. So I do think he'll rebound. I do think he'll be much better goalie next year. But I think it's important as well. And this isn't a knock on Brian Elliott. I mean, Brian Elliott's 36 years old. He had games this year where he played really well for the Flyers. But when he was, when Carter was struggling, they had to lean on a 36-year-old goalie too much, and he wasn't fresh. He doesn't have the stamina that you have in your early 20s and mid 20s to be able to play on a night in, night out basis, especially with the schedule as condensed as it was, right? So that's why Brian Elliott ended up failing for them. But I think that what they're going to do is one of their targets here in the offseason is going to be to find a tandem goaltender with Carter Hart who can, play over the course of an 82-game season, maybe play, 30 give him 30 starts. And then if for some reason Carter is struggling, is someone who can handle a little bit heavier of a workworkload than Brian Elliott did. So I think that's going to be an important part of the Flyers restructure this summer, is to make sure that they get a younger, more capable backup goaltender in case Hart does not get back to where he needs to be.
Touching back on the team defense and everything, they were second last in the league in goals allowed, second last in the league in penalty killing. And you mentioned even the young stalwarts, the 24, 25-year-olds on the back end, Travis Sanheim, Philip Myers, they combined for minus 33 on the back end. So they struggled as well. But if we look at even the team defense and the penalty killing, why was the penalty killing as well as bad?
Yeah, so the thing that really depressed me about the penalty kill is that they just left guys there, on the doorstep. I mean, if you go back and look at a lot of the goals that they've given up on the power play, or on the penalty kill rather, it's mostly guys who are just sitting by themselves back door, or they're left alone in front. It seems like those defensemen weren't clearing the porch. They weren't. They got a little bit too high in their coverage, and guys were able to get down low, and the goalie's kind of left on an island there. I mean, you can't, yes, you'd like the goalie to make a save here and there, and some of those times you sit there and say, okay, look, if a mistake's going to happen, the goalie needs to come in and bail out his defenseman sometimes, and that didn't happen either. So, I mean, you can put it on the goalies too, but it's not completely on the goalies on the penalty kill. I mean, that Flyers penalty kill was slow. And it was not forceful. It did not pressure the puck. They only scored one shorthanded goal all season, and that was 2 games ago. Scott Lawton got it a couple games ago against New Jersey. That was their first one in the entire year. So they weren't pressuring the puck a lot. There's not a lot of speed on it, and they weren't physical. So I mean, it's missing all the ingredients that you need to have a good penalty kill. And the Flyers haven't had a good penalty kill in a long time, but this year's was probably the worst I've seen in my 21 years covering the team.
We'll go to some of the other players and maybe some other players that actually played fairly well this year, but I really want to talk about this offseason. It's going to be a pretty big offseason for the Flyers, starting off with that expansion draft with Seattle. Who do you see being available and possibly taken by the Kraken?
So I think what the Flyers are going to try and do is they're going to try and convince Seattle to take JVR. And the reason I think that is something that makes sense is Seattle is going to need to add some salary. I mean, they're going to have to take on some salary to get to the floor, right? So you take a guy who's 31 years old, got a couple seasons left, and yeah, he's making a little bit more than he probably should. But he's been a good player this year. He's been a really good player at 31 years old. It's been his best season as a pro. He's still one of the best net front power play guys in the league. Definitely one of, I think, the best tip guy. I mean, the way he tips pucks, both on the backhand and on the forehand. I mean, that's a skill that's really, really good. So those things make him a valuable player. And so I think that they're going to really try and push Seattle to make that the player that they take from the Flyers. And I think that you can entice them by working out a separate trade where you give them something of more of value and say, look, we'll make this trade with you if you take that contract from us as part of the expansion draft. So I think that's what the Flyers are going to try to do. Now, if Seattle doesn't want to play ball, it's going to get interesting because I think that there might be, some other players that are left unprotected that, I don't know, I mean, maybe they see a little bit more value in. I mean, obviously, one of the things that happened, Peter, right at the deadline was the Flyers signed Scott Lawton to a new contract. He was an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. By signing him to that new deal, you're basically putting him into your 7, right, that you got to protect. That now opens up somebody else that probably wouldn't have been protected or that would have been protected otherwise. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think Seattle will take Voracek. That contract's a little bit too long and a little bit too much. I don't think they'll take Gostisbehere. I think that's a maybe. I mean, that's probably the second choice. If they say no to the JVR, then the Flyers are going to say, what about Shane Gostisbehere? You want to take him instead? So I think that's the Flyers' second choice for them to take. And I think it's also important to note that they didn't make a trade for a defenseman at the deadline because they wanted to protect Provorov, Sanheim, Myers moving forward, right? So I think that, so beyond that, like, who's left? Who gets taken? And, Nick Aube-Kubel, Justin Braun. I mean, these are the kinds of names that you're talking about. So I guess it really depends on how Seattle values players on other teams and where they all slot, right? And what deals are cut and beyond that. But I certainly think that the Flyers would rather it be a JVR first, a Gostisbehere second, than it would be to be one of those other players that are further down the list.
Yeah, we didn't really see this cap problem happening with these teams, with them signing these contracts, especially because of the pandemic and everything.
Right.
How do you think the players feel on the Flyers, the Jakub Voraceks, the Shane Gostisbeheres that will be possibly available to them now to Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've made peace with it at this point, especially Gostisbehere. I mean, he's heard his name in trade rumors for 3 years now. He was put on waivers earlier this year, and nobody claimed him. So I think Gostisbehere kind of knows that the change of scenery is probably coming for him. If the Flyers could find a way, to move that salary. I don't think Voracek expects to be taken in expansion, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Flyers don't try and work something out with another team to make a deal involving Voracek if they take some salary back in return. It was interesting. We had Nick Kypreos on SnowTheGoalie podcast a few weeks ago, and Kipper suggested that there's a real possibility of working something out with Calgary because Calgary is a team that's got a very similar situation as the Flyers, is that they just can't get it together. They have a lot of high-end, high-money talent that's not working there. And so maybe it's a situation where we trade you our high-money guy for your high-money guy and see if it works. So does Voracek for Gaudreau in some facet, does that work out for either team? Who knows? Maybe. So I think that Voracek looks at it and understands that there's a potential that he gets moved. I don't think he thinks he's going to Seattle. JVR, I think he understands as well that what his situation is, and I think that he's had such a good season that he knows that the Flyers are going to try and move him somewhere, whether it's in expansion or via trade. I know that ultimately he would love to go to a team like Minnesota. His wife's from up there. They bought a home up there. That's where he's already said that's where he's going to retire to, even though he's from New Jersey. He's more of a local, Philly, New York kind of guy. He wants to be near his wife's family, and they're in Minnesota. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's something along the lines there where, hey, if you can make it work out to go somewhere like that, great. If not, I'll play wherever I have to play for the next couple of years of my career and then call it a career. So I think he's, again, as a veteran guy who's already been traded once, I don't think that he's really worried about it. I think the younger guys might be a little bit more concerned just because they haven't been moved before, right? It's going to be interesting. It's going to be really, really interesting to see how this plays out. But I think that the Flyers, for certain, Peter, they're going to be very active. They're going to lose somebody in expansion. They're probably going to make a couple trades before the draft or at the draft. And once free agency opens, I think that they're going to be pursuing 2 or 3 players. So I think you're going to see some turnover on this team, not blow it up kind of turnover, but I do think you'll have 5 or 6 new faces in this lineup next year.
And then we have a bit of the large contract with Kevin Hayes. And do you
Yes.
feel that he has his feet up off the table? I've got my no movement clause. I'm good here.
Well, so his no movement clause is a little bit different than Giroux's. I mean, Giroux, you can't go anywhere, right? Hayes' no movement clause, from what I understand, is only through the expansion draft. So that once that expansion draft clears, then he can be moved. Although I think he might have, I mean, this is what's not really known. He might have a limited no move still after that. Like he can, he gets to choose X number of teams that he can go to, kind of thing. So I think that might be part of it. He's had a bad year. He's had a really bad year. He did not look anything like the guy he was in 2019, 2020. He's been slow. He's been somewhat productive at times, but that was earlier in the year. I mean, he's got 1 goal in his last 17 games or something along those lines, and 2 in the last 28 games. I mean, if you're a second line center, you got to score more than that. And it's just been not good. He's not been good defensively. He turns the puck over a lot. So the question is going to really become, hey, can we fix this? Or is this a guy that we have to try and move on from in some capacity? I have a feeling the Flyers might be stuck with that contract, unfortunately, at least for, into next year. And I think that they got to hope that he rebounds and gives them more of what he gave them last season than what he gave them this season.
Joel Farabee had a solid sophomore season. He doubled up on his first season already. There's still some games left. 8 goals last year, 16 goals this year. Where do you see him moving forward in terms of the next few seasons?
Yeah, I think Farabee's a sniper. I really do. I mean, everybody keeps saying, we need a sniper. We need a sniper. Well, you know what? Farabee's got that shot. So does this kid, Wade Allison, who they just, called up and has been playing the last 10 games. So I really like what they bring, and I really like where Farabee's at. He did have a stretch during this season, though, where he, hit a wall because he was playing so great through the first, I want to say 25 games, and then the next 15 were just bad. And it was so bad that he was put on the 4th line. He was never benched, but he was demoted for sure. And he's been better of late in the last 8 to 10 games. I think he's played better hockey. He scored a goal again last night. He's got 35 points. I mean, you can't, for a kid in his second season who's 21 years old, to have 35 points in a 56 game season, if he ends up with, let's say he ends up with 37, 38, I mean, that pans out. If you put it out over the course of an 82 game season, you're probably looking at a 60-point player at 21, which is really good. So I like Farabee. I like where he's headed. I like the way he approaches the game. He's not afraid of anything. He won't go to the net. He's not afraid of physical contact. He's got a little bit of an attitude, which is good. So I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be a really good player. He's the one young bright spot, I think, that's going to come out of this dreadful season for the Flyers.
Again, you can find him on Twitter at SanAndPhilly. Thank you for stopping by again, Anthony.
Hey, Peter, anytime.
Now we head to Second City to discuss the Chicago Blackhawks. For basically our last regular season team ISO, welcome back friend of the show, Nick Gismondi. You can find him on Twitter at Nick Gismondi. He's the co-host of Blackhawks Live on WGN Radio 720, and he covers them as well for the NHL Network. How you doing, Nick? And are you getting any golf yet out there?
I feel bad for those of you that are north of the border in the United States for multiple reasons, obviously. And hopefully things turn around for you guys and you're able to get things under control. But I know you're not able to golf up there yet. And that is at least a luxury that currently we do have down in the States, and thankful for it. But yeah, getting a bit of golf in. I actually do a little bit of coverage for some golf networks as well in the off season, and that sort of has already ramped up a little bit. So I've gotten to venture around the States a little bit here for work purposes, and I've gotten to tee it up a little bit. And I'm actually currently in Colorado right now, and the weather is finally starting to turn nice here too. So I'm getting the swing back. It's a little rusty right now, though. Let's just say I won't be playing any tournaments anytime soon.
All right. That's great. Great to hear that you're getting out there. It's still even frigid here too. So even if we want to kind of get out, it's like, it's not great. And it's like, it's May. Come on, weather.
Yeah. Well, Colorado's the same way. It was, today it's 60. Tomorrow it's going to be 70, and then the weekend we've got 75. But 2 days ago it was snowing, so we got 4 inches of snow on Monday. So I don't know. I have no idea. You go from hot and cold. One day you're in shorts and a golf shirt, and the next day I'm in putting on the winter coat again, going out to get the mail. So it's whatever. Mother Nature, she's fickle right now too, like everybody else, I guess.
It's been a wacky year in Chicago. In our season preview episodes, and everybody can go check them out on the website, jablamsports.com, Season 6, Episode 4, the Discovery Central Divisional Preview, all of our experts picked the Windy City team to finish last or second last in the division. My friend and pal, Nick, you, of course, betting on them. I don't know if it's yourself or I know you're such a positive guy. With everything you do, you're extremely positive. Is it just your positivity, or was it a good estimation of them as you had them just missing out on the playoffs and they were close enough? They're in between.
Yeah, I'm not a big self-tire pumper, but I have been around the game of hockey my entire life since I was 5 years old, and I've been a broadcaster for 25 years now, and I like to think that I understand the game well, and I like to think that I understand the makeup more even so than the logistics of a hockey game, of a team even more importantly. I've coached, I've played, I've broadcasted, I've sort of been involved in all aspects of the sport. So it's not hard for me to kind of look at what a team is doing, not just on the ice, but behind the scenes, and what that locker room looks like and what that leadership looks like. And I'm talking coaching staff, I'm talking general managers, I'm talking just philosophy of the group. And, for me, the Chicago Blackhawks as an organization on a whole do everything the right way. And I knew coming in that there was going to be a mix of veterans, and I knew coming in that there was going to be a mix of rookies, and I knew that they were going to face some adversity, and I knew that everybody else was going to slug on them and say, hey, they're not going to be able to do this. Well, I know enough about that room to know that makeup isn't going to like that very much, and that they were going to steer into the wind on that. And I know enough about Jeremy Colleton and Stan Bowman that they were the same mentality. So I think it was an us versus them thing, and I knew that from the off season, and they weren't going to be told that they were going to be dead last by anybody. And so for me, it was an estimation based on what I knew that room was going to be capable of. Herb Brooks is classic for saying, I don't need all the best players. I need the right players. And I think what Stan Bowman has done throughout, his tenure as the GM, despite the fact that people want to rag on him, is that he has put the right pieces in place. And we've seen that as an effective strategy throughout this season. And Jeremy Colleton as the coach, he's a young guy. He can motivate. And, the last season, he didn't really have the buy-in from everybody that he wanted to have a buy-in from. And I knew that this year he was going to get it. And I knew that was going to inspire the young guys. And as a result, you saw a team that made a hell of a run and a hell of a push. And frankly, came damn close. If they would have, there was so many games in the middle of the season where they went into overtime with teams that they were going to be coming down the stretch against. So they gave up a valuable point probably 10 times. And unfortunately, that's the difference between them making the playoffs and not this year.
One standout is the goaltender, Kevin Lankinen. The Chicago Blackhawks signed him back in 2018 from Finland, and he was in the minors since. Well, he has looked pretty good, except for maybe not so impressive April. Did anyone even see this coming?
That is the one area that nobody saw coming, including myself, and I'm happy to be honest about that. I was concerned about the goaltending position when Corey Crawford decided that he wasn't going to be a part of the organization, and they parted ways. I had said back at the trade deadline 2 seasons ago when they traded Robin Leonard to the Vegas Golden Knights that, okay, well, you were going to lose one of them. The other one's got to stick around, and he's going to be the number one. So when they lost Leonard and then they lost Crawford, I was like, oh boy. Nothing against Malcolm Subban. I love Malcolm. I've watched him play in Vegas, and I think he's got nothing but upside. But I just didn't see him coming along super quickly and being thrust into a starting role right away. When he's been used to a backup schedule and and whatnot, and but he's had some unbelievable mentors including guys like Crawford, including guys like Marc-Andre Fleury and Tuukka Rask when he was in Boston. So to see the way that Malcolm Subban played this year as well, like Lankinen is the focus for sure. He was unbelievable and came out of the gate and just has that confidence and everything about him that you want in a goaltender. But I do have to give a ton of credit to Malcolm as well, because I was massively impressed at, what he showed this season, and the combo of him and Lankinen was fantastic and frankly won them hockey games. Both of those guys can be credited with pulling things out of the fire a little bit in certain circumstances for those guys. So, massive hats off to Jimmy Waite and his staff to have Lankinen and Malcolm and even Colin Delia, in a spot where they were ready to go this year. So, certainly a surprise, most certainly a pleasant one, and very optimistic about the future of the Chicago Blackhawks in between the pipes in the years to come with those guys.
So following up on that, Lankinen had a good season. Subban, you believe, still has a lot in him to show. Where do you go forward next season? Who is starting? How is it going to play out?
Yeah, I think what we've seen from Jeremy Colleton, even when he had Corey Crawford and Robin Leonard, is that he's not afraid to go with the bounce back and forth. He's not afraid to not name a starter and just go with the hot hand. And I think that we've seen that trend this season from him as well. Coach kind of likes to go with who's hot, and he it's not a dictatorship. Coach listens to the committee, listens to Jimmy Waite, listens to his assistants, and they kind of sort of make those calls. So, I think moving forward, if I'm being honest, in a normal year, which God willing it is next year, I think you're going to see a Lankinen Subban combo. Obviously the expansion draft throws some question marks into the mix, and I just would not even try to speculate on what's going to happen there right now. But I think if what I've been seeing this season plays out, I think next year in between the pipes for the Chicago Blackhawks, you're going to see a mixture of Lankinen and Malcolm Subban.
You don't want to speculate, but let's speculate.
I knew that was coming. Walked into it. Probably set you up for it.
It's going to be an interesting offseason, of course, for the Hawks. The expansion draft is coming with Seattle. Who do you think at least is going to be available out of the top players maybe, and who could the Kraken maybe take?
Oh boy. I really don't know. And it's funny because I pride myself on having a pretty good idea, but I look up and down that roster, and with what happened this season, it is just so hard to decide. And I think part of the reason why I can't make a real firm, I'll give you a name in a second here. And it bums me out to give this name because I think this guy's a rock star, and I think he's also a friend of mine. But I think so much of it is going to come down to what the makeup of that room is and what the direction is that Stan and Jeremy and the staff have envisioned with this team moving forward, and who they want to be next year. Yeah. Right? Like that is a big part of it too. This year coming into the season, it was, listen, we're rebuilding. And then this pleasant surprise of a year happened, and you're like, oh, what the? They're way ahead of the curve. And if you ask anybody in the organization, from the scouts to the management, to the coach, what these guys have done this year is invaluable. You've ramped up rookies, and you've accelerated timelines. So the expansion draft comes at a tough time because I don't know as though there's anybody you want to lose. Obviously, they're going to protect the big names. You're not going to see a Duncan Keith or or Kane or a Lankinen or a Subban or a Jonathan Taves or anything like that on an expansion list for the obvious reasons, or a Kirby Dach or a Boquist or a Nylander or a Connor Murphy. You're not going to see any guys like that kind of pop up. I think, unfortunately, the guys that you might see pop up are Calvin DeHaan or a Ryan Carpenter. Ryan's a guy that's just an unbelievable character guy. He's a third, fourth line guy, but he brings so much to the table, and he was so effective when he was in Vegas when they picked him as an expansion guy. So I think guys like that are appetizing, but I certainly hope those guys don't go anywhere. I don't want to see anybody go anywhere. I love all those guys. So it's the hard part about being attached to the team, but also being the journalist. But other than that, it's hard to even fathom what they're going to do. I mean, time is obviously going to tell them when that list comes out. I think I'd be able to make a better assessment of who Seattle's going to take. But it's going to be interesting to see who goes there.
All right, I won't bite anymore further than that.
Appreciate that. That's a good friend right there, Pete.
Yeah. You mentioned
talk to these guys still.
Yeah. I will touch base on this, and you might not like me then further after this question. With them probably protecting Duncan Keith, the veteran, he's had one of those rare years with a bad plus-minus. We saw it, -15 so far. He's been declining in the last few years. Where do you see the team moving if they're going to protect him in this expansion draft? Where do you move with Duncan? Is he going to stay a Hawk for at least the duration of his contract? How long is he going to be playing for?
Yeah, I don't see Duncan Keith going anywhere. Maybe it's been a weird year for Duncan. I don't think it's been a bad year for him. I think, maybe the stats tell a different story than what's actually going on. But a guy like that has done so much to bring along a young defensive core. He's such a character guy in the room, and he's probably one of the reasons why that accelerated development happened with so many of these young guys, especially in the absence of a Seabrook, especially the absence of a Jonathan Taves this season in that room. Guys like Duncan Keith and Patrick Kane were absolutely invaluable to the accelerated growth of this group, despite how young they were and despite the odds that they were facing this year. So just on the sheer locker room guy and the toughness and the minutes that a guy like Duncan Keith plays outweighs any plus minus numbers that you're seeing from him, in my opinion. You can't let a guy like that go. You can't let a guy like that go because you need guys like that in the room. And it goes back to what I said about, having the right pieces in place. You have to have the right pieces in that locker room, and everybody's got a role to play. And I think Duncan Keith's role in that inside of that room and on that team and in that city is one that's intrinsically valuable. And listen, the guy's in unbelievable shape. He's in unbelievable shape. I just started working out again, and I don't even hold a candle to Duncan Keith takes his shirt off and everybody's like, yeah, okay. That's the kind of guy they make like statues out of in like Italy and Greece, right? So, I just think what he brings and who he is and what he has been puts him in rare air in that locker room and in that organization. So I don't see them doing anything to move or negate or get rid of Duncan Keith. I think he's a Chicago Blackhawk, and I think he'll be a Chicago Blackhawk until he's not a hockey player anymore.
You mentioned statues. Let's talk about the United Center statues. There are some great ones out there. We've seen this core. Who is going to get a statue then? Who do you think is going to get a statue out of these guys?
It's so easy, and you know the answer. I mean, 88 and 19, they probably already are designing the dang thing.
Yeah.
I think that 88 and 19 are shoo-ins. I mean, gosh, they might even move Jordan's statue over and just put it right there in the heart of the United Center in the atrium. But I'm just kidding. They're not going to move Jordan's statue, but they'll find a really great place for Kane and Taves' statue when that happens. I think those guys are in the mix for sure. I don't think it's a question mark. I think Keith's number gets retired eventually, but if you're talking about statues, it is 100%. It is 100% Taves and Kane. And listen, I'll throw this one out there too. I think there's something very special down the road for Coach Q at some point as well. Obviously, he ushered the Blackhawks back into the golden years, and he meant a lot to the city, and now it's Jeremy Colton's turn, and I think Jeremy's doing a good job. But I think from that historic early 2000s to mid 2000s run that we saw the Hawks go on, I think it is a no-brainer that 88 and 19 have statues right in the mix with all those other legends at the UC whenever they decide to retire. But let's be honest, Patrick Kane, he's going to play another 30 years, so they can hold off on scoring that statue just yet.
I'm the same way with you. I'm like, why is everybody talking in Toronto where I am? Why is everybody talking about these Raptors and who deserves a trophy, a statue? Is it Kawhi? Is it Lowry? I'm like, what about Joe Carter? Or one of those guys? Like, we don't have one yet for those guys. So, like, how are you even talking about these guys that are still playing?
You're skipping a generation here. Yeah. No, I hear you. If the Hawks were smart, though, they'd give Patrick Sharp a statue. I mean, that guy is just, all kinds of cool. So.
Yeah. Oh, man. All right. There's been some interesting seasons for some guys, but I thought a great signing in the past offseason from Switzerland was Puis Suter. He had a solid rookie campaign, 13 goals, 23 points thus far. How's he looked out there, and why is he playing pretty well so far?
Love him. Just so much energy, right? So much energy. And when he was really having a ton of success, when he was playing on that line with Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat, it's because he's so quick and he's so smart and he's so versatile that he's all over loose pucks. And, that is such a big key in the way the Hawks were successful this year, just in terms of their transition game. Their transition game, when it was on, this team was winning hockey games and playing very well. And a big key to that was a guy like Puce who was able to get on loose pucks. He was able to move quickly through the neutral zone with little to no errors. And then he's smart enough to be able to dish and get it to guys like DeBrincat and Kane. And you saw his numbers go up. And, for those guys to have somebody so creative and so quick-footed and so intelligent to make plays and to be completely unselfish was just a perfect fit. I love that line when they're together. They're flowing, they're moving. And I think that's a good credit to the European scouting. We've seen a few of those little surprises. And there's some more surprises coming in the next couple of years with the ability of that group to pick up these guys and to find them. Diamonds in the rough, Stan Bowman has said multiple times. So there's a strategy there, and it's working, and there's more of that to come.
Two quick ones before we go. One thing is another player that's come out flying out of the gate, and everybody thought, okay, maybe he's this year's Dominik Kubalik. But he's really tailed off since the middle of March with only 1 goal, 2 assists in 19 games now. So what's caused Kurashev, and that's Philip Kurashev, to fall off? Is he Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, the first half or the latter half? Which is he really?
Yeah, no, I think he's a little bit of both. I think this is a talented guy. I think that this is such a weird year. It's such a weird year. And it was such an awkward offseason. And there was such a weird training camp / start to the season / all of these different things. So I don't think it's real fair to kind of evaluate guys with too much of a fine-tooth comb in regards to how this season happened. I like the way that Kurashev plays. I think that he fits this style of play very well that the Hawks do play. And I think it's just a matter of him sort of kind of finding his footing and figuring out exactly who he wants to be. And I think he's in between that right now. I think he's not quite sure who he is and what this team needs him to be yet. And like most guys, as soon as they kind of click with that, as soon as that hits and it takes a second, then you're going to see who he really is. But I think everybody's going to be real happy when he finds that out.
One solid prospect, Wyatt Kalynuk. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yep.
All right, cool. Well,
look at you. Look at you.
Perfect. I'm not catching every game, but I've caught a couple of them. He was drafted 7th round back in 2017, played 3 years for University of Wisconsin. Hey, we were talking about this before we started recording. He played with Cole Caulfield and a few others. Caulfield's killing it.
So good. Love Cole too. Great kid too, by the way. Just an absolutely awesome human being.
So they brought up Wyatt this season. He's played those games so far. I think it's about 17. How does he look so far? And what do you see him projecting to be?
Yeah, this is going to be a guy that everybody's going to be real excited about. And I think when he's gotten into games and he's played and we've seen that little consistency out of him, everybody's pretty excited. And I think, again, it's a little bit of the same thing. We don't quite know who he's going to be yet in a weird year. And I think that this is a guy whose upside is just through the roof. So fits in the room well. The boys love him. I think he's looked great on the ice. I think he's played in a variety of different situations. And I think that the organization is still trying to figure out where you can kind of slot him in a little bit and exactly what kind of player is he going to be when we see that consistency come out of him. So I expect a big offseason from him. I think that this is a guy that's really going to go to school on how the Blackhawks want him to play. And I think that this is a guy who's going to tap into some of these veteran guys and get some advice, much like Kirby Doc did last year. After Kirby's first season, he hit up Patrick Kane and he got Patrick Kane's trainer and coach. He did all the things that Patrick Kane, did in his early years. And I think that a guy like Wyatt is going to kind of follow that same playbook and lean on a guy like Kirby and lean on some of these other veteran guys and a DeBrincat and a Strome and sort of pick their brains on how to be that guy that this organization wants. And I think, early next season, we're going to get a real good indication of how much work did he put in, how much does he want it, and who is he going to be for this team.
Again, you can find him on Twitter at Nick Gismondi. It was great chatting with you again, Nick.
Always good talking to you. Stay safe out there. And for gosh sakes, get some golf in, man.
Thanks to our guests. Nick, I hope you get some tea time out there. Looks like the Hawks are moving in the right direction. Anthony, they look like they have some really good pieces for the future with the Flyers, but this summer is going to be a big one with maybe a few of these veterans leaving the team a couple of different ways. Also, thanks to Tyler Kasch. We went old school on those divisions. Oh, man, wow. This was a big episode, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed it. And good luck on your playoff picks. You can check out ours as well with me and my pals on the website, jablamsports.com, the playoff pool. Remember, if you've enjoyed anything you've heard in this episode or don't, please tweet at me or even our guests. You can follow me on Twitter at Russia98 or the entire team at Jablam Sports. If you want, you can also contact us on our website. You can use the hashtag at Jablam Sports, Jablam Sports, that's Jablam, and our website is jablamsports.com/contact for our contact page there. Please check out our website. Go to jablamsports.com to see all our podcasts and even game notes for each episode, including this one. And you'll get our guests' info and links to things we mentioned on this show. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify. And of course, click on the 3 dots in your podcasting app and share this episode with 3 friends you know. Please and thank you. Also, follow us on our Facebook group, Jablam Sports. Check us out, folks. Thank you, everyone. And to every one of our listeners, I'm giving you a virtual hug. Stay healthy, listen, be yourself, and stay strong.